You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hey, everybody. Good day, top of the day, or maybe middle of the day, nighttime. I don't know, wherever you are. This is Doug Thorpe, and this is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is inevitable in the workplace. If you get two or more people together, you're probably at some point going to have some conflict. And my guest today is someone who does a lot of work in that space. Her name is Karin Hurt. Karin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, I kind of want to dive right in. I guess the first question, as I was kind of reviewing your material, thing that popped out in my mind, do you think the nature of conflicts that we're experiencing in the workplace have changed over time? Are we in a different place now, or different issues causing conflict?
Yes, and I have good data to show exactly what's happening there.
Well, please elaborate. Yeah.
My husband, David Dye, and I did the World Workplace Conflict and Collaboration Survey, and we surveyed 5,000 people in 45 countries in all of the United States. And we asked a couple of questions, and one of them was that question. So the first question was, are we experiencing more or less conflict than like just a couple of years ago? And 70% said they were experiencing more, significantly more than they'd had in the past. So that's a big one. But when we dug into all of the verbatim comments in that survey, what we heard was that the nature of conflict was really changing. And what we call these are conflict cocktails, because it's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So they're more complex. So, for example, you've got a lot of uncertainty and change happening in a lot of organizations. People are reorganizing, mergers, like all of that has always happened, but there's even more of that going on right now. Plus, you've got new technologies coming in. So you're shaking up the workforce with all this change. And at the same time, you've got people who are exhausted, burned out, understaffed, and that combination creates what we call the wedge driver conflict cocktail. I'll give you one more that really came up a lot. And this one we call the blown fuse. And so you've got tired employees, particularly like in healthcare or retail, customer facing restaurants, coffee shops. The employees are, coming in there. It's understaffing, also exhausted. And then you have customers who are dealing with all those same kinds of things. And so everybody's on edge. And then you put in there tip creep and increased expectations. Well, if I'm going to tip you, I should get this better service. And that creates a conflict cocktail.
Fascinating. And I like the cocktail idea, because as you were describing that, I was thinking through some of my classic conflicts I've had to deal with. And you're absolutely right. There was no one issue that stood alone. Inevitably, it was a boiling point of a combination of things, and it was hard to identify which one was the real trigger. And it was even harder to really kind of get to the root of it and help bring a peace and a resolution.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I do my keynotes or I'm at conferences, I have an exercise where I have people design their own conflict cocktail, and everybody can immediately talk about what they are. What is the combination of stressors that's coming together?
Yeah. I am very sensitive to the one element you touched on, the notion of burnout. In fact, my latest book that I just released this month is called Stop Leading on Empty. And it's for leaders who are feeling that it's more than burnout. It's just that sheer exhaustion of running full speed, burning the candle at both ends, and never really getting a lot of relief. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think about the cocktail idea, but I bring out in the book that there's really 4 key elements that leaders are facing that might be all simultaneously happening in the workplace that causes that sense of running on empty. And now that we're talking about this conflict cocktail, that's exactly what.
Doug, what are a couple of those? I'm really curious.
Yeah, number one is the whole idea of dealing with the hybrid workforce, the non-human interaction that you are faced to have, and I know that doesn't happen in 100% of jobs. A lot of things are back online. I've got a coaching client that runs a big manufacturing plant, so that they never left. I mean, they've always been there, but what he has to do going up the organization is virtual meetings with bosses and seniors elsewhere in the country, so there's still this element of disconnect. The other one that's a classic is the generational gap differences and issues going there. And I find myself, when I'm talking to leaders that are suffering that, I had a meeting recently. I was talking to a millennial leader who, and it's hard to think about it, but the millennials in the workforce have already been at companies 15 years. So they're starting to be middle and slightly upper management. And he was agonizing over the Gen Zs that he's got on his team. Well, that's just one generation right there.
Right.
And then there's also that sense of doing more with less, and you pointed to that as organizations shift priorities, change organizations, merge and reorg. There's all manner of challenge that they're dealing with there.
Yeah. So Doug, it's interesting that you talk about the generational thing. What are the biggest conflicts when we're applying our work from our book, Powerful Phrases for dealing with workplace conflict in organizations, and we're going in and working with the executive teams? One of the biggest calls I get from CEOs, and I know you work with a lot of very executive leaders too, is why don't people have, and they use more couth, right? Like, why don't they know that they should return the email within 24 hours? Why don't they know that they should not come to the board meeting dressed in a hoodie, right? Why don't they? And so I always say, and probably like you do, have you told them? So like we call it magical thinking, but we have 4 dimensions of productive workplace conflict or collaboration, and one of them is clarity. Do we have shared expectations? And so much conflict comes from, well, I shouldn't have to tell them because they get paid the big bucks, they've got a master's degree, they've been in this role for 10 years. But sometimes all you need to do is set the expectations. Oh, okay, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
But instead, we just get the conflict stews because we assume they should already know.
Well, and I think that stems, and I know it in my work, and while I haven't done any good technical statistical work on it, I've got mountains of anecdotal stories to share. There is that notion of, well, when I grew up, my dad wouldn't let me do da da da, and they bring that value and that principle to work, and they project that on everybody without ever having spoken it. Right. And you're right. It's a simple matter of setting expectations. And I'll just add on that, there's one interesting dynamic, though, in this. I think when we go down the path of talking about expectations, I think it's important, and your word clarity is one of my favorite words, talking to leaders, of thinking about being able to be crystal clear on all things. But expectations only come from fulfillment of obligations.
Unpack that a little more. I'm interested.
Well, the classic scenario is when you're doing a new hire, you might have talked about opportunity and things during the actual hiring process, but you make the offer, the candidate accepts, and now you've got day one at work. They're checking in, and they're put at a workstation. There might be a continuing dialogue. Tradition is there's a continuing dialogue about expectations. Well, tell me a little bit more about what you really think about this kind of work. And the employee says, well, I want to get reviewed frequently. I want opportunities for advancement. I want a raise on some reasonable schedule. And they start laying out all these things. And the employer turns around and says, all right, my expectation is that you be here on time, you follow our procedures, you learn our systems, so on and so on. And everybody goes, check, check, and they're off to the races. But you got to prop that up with a combination of the obligation part, and both parties need to voice that.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, if you plotted it out in a four blocker, one side being employee, one side being employer, the expectation box at the top, all those things that people want. When you start really drilling into the obligation part, it's a diametric opposite. See, in real simple analogy, if the employee says, I want to get reviewed frequently, I want a regular recurring raise, I want advancement opportunities, their statement of obligation ought to be, I'm going to dive into the training. I'm going to learn these systems. I'm going to
Right.
follow the procedures. I'm going to meet the right people. I'm going to engage with the team around me. And that's an obligation commitment for that employee. The employer, though, has basically said, that's my expectation. I need you to do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my obligation, if you do, is, I'm going to give you a review. I'm going to help you
Right.
advance. I'm going to develop you as an employee. Now,
Right.
those are just real simple
Yeah.
examples, but it's a lot more involved depending on the situation.
Yeah, yeah, and it can get so tricky then when a manager may have all the intentions to meet those obligations, and then something happens. So for example, I was a Verizon executive for 20 years. Well, I was at Verizon for 20 years. Last years there, I was an executive, and before I founded Let's Grow Leaders, our company now. And there was a trajectory that I was on, box nine, succession planning, da da da. If you do this role, your next role is this, right? I met everything, knocked it out of the park, exceeds expectations, right? Organizational, everything reorganized, never got that role, right? And so, and I don't think it was because my boss was a bad person, right? She certainly had every expectation that she was going to meet what that commitment was, right? So that's the other part that gets so tricky.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and even the very tactical things that are going on now, people that have been with a company for a while, and there's been a little bit of a tradition and consistency in merit reviews. I'm dealing with a company now. I won't name names, but they've lopped off all merit reviews for the unforeseeable future. It's you're not going to get one.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you might have gotten comfortable at a 3% bump on a regular recurring basis, but guess what? That's not even going to exist.
yeah.
So, you're right. That introduces that other layer of what you might think of as external factors that
Right.
it's one thing for a manager and an employee to have a relationship and have their own dynamic that they can
Yeah,
develop and nurture over time.
yeah,
But when there's all those external factors, what is the boss dealing with
right,
that impacts the whole team?
right. Yep.
Terrible stuff. Well, so let's get into the resolution part. So
Yeah.
I'm dying to now dive into what's a person to do and all this stuff.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So one of the most important things when you're in a conflict, first of all, conflict in and of itself is not bad. We need conflict. We need tension. What we don't need is destructive, poorly handled conflict. But my husband and co-author and we run a global business together. We write books together. We build all our curriculum together. We have conflict every single day. My brain works completely different than his. I move faster, like big picture. He's like, get it right. Let's do this right. You need that tension between those two kinds of personalities and skill sets. And but we've also are married and we still want to have a good marriage at the end of the day. And so part of it is knowing that just because you have a difference of opinion does not mean that that is a bad conflict, and just to start there. And then the second is having the courage to have the conversation that you might rather avoid. So in our research, 21%. So we asked them to think about a significant conflict that they had in the past. And what advice would they give their former selves if they were faced with a similar conflict again? And 21% said, I would talk about it or I'd talk about it sooner. And so, because conflicts don't get better by avoiding them or shoving them down, right? And so there are four dimensions of productive conflict that we talk about. So the first thing is to say, which of these dimensions is at play here? So connection, are we connected as human beings? Because if you are not, if you don't, it's a lot harder to give somebody the benefit of the doubt if you don't know them or trust them. So connection. So do we need to start there? Clarity. Do we have a shared understanding of success? Curiosity. Are we genuinely interested in one another's perspectives or what's possible? Or are we coming into the conflict like this, like I think I already know? And then commitment. Do we have a shared agreement? So, if you've ever been in one of those Groundhog Day conflicts that you thought you resolved it and there it's happening again, usually it's because there hasn't been a conversation about exactly what's going to happen next and how you're going to check in to see if our commitments are made. So within those four, so the first thing I would do is if you're feeling a conflict, I would step back and say, what's at play here? A lot of the time, what's at play is clarity. And so if you can really say, so we have a 12, there's 300 powerful phrases in the book, but we have 12 that we call the GOATs, or the greatest of all time powerful phrases. And one of my favorite GOATs is this: what would a successful outcome do for you? Now, this is different than what does success look like. So, Doug, maybe imagine you and I are collaborating on a project, right? And we got some joint publication we're putting out, and we know we've got to get it to the publisher by Monday morning at 9:00. And, so we're working on it, and we've got a couple of weeks to get this article done. And before we start, we know what success looks like. We know what a good article looks like. We've been at this a minute. But what if we stopped and said this? And I say, Doug, what would a successful outcome do for you? And you say, Karin, I got to tell you, let's not let this thing go up to the last minute. So we're working and scrambling all weekend, the weekend before, because I have been working really hard and I've got a commitment to my family that I'm going to do better about not working all weekend long. And I say, okay, thank you for telling me that. And you may say to me, what does a successful outcome do for you? And I might say, you know what? I have been really trying to get the attention of this publication, right? Like, this has been really important to me. So when we get on this call with this editor and they start asking tough questions, can you let me answer a couple of tough questions so they actually see what an expert I am in this arena? Now, if we've not had that conversation, I might be very busy and just willing to spend that whole weekend working on that thing. And you may think you're trying to help me by jumping in and answering all the questions. And we have a conflict that we didn't need to have because we didn't have that 5-minute conversation.
I love it. And part of that goes back to the under the umbrella of clarity. And I think that is such a powerful concept that so many people miss for so many reasons and applied in so many ways. That's brilliant. I love that. So say that phrase again.
What would a successful outcome do for you?
Do for you. I like
so
that.
it gets to motive. And, to the example that you were giving earlier about, employer expectations. Well, that's kind of a macro question. So a new hire comes in. Okay, so what, first year in this job, what would a successful outcome do for you in this first year of the job?
No. I love that.
It's my favorite of all 300 powerful phrases. My favorite one. So.
Well, related to this, if I may, back on the kind of the employee-employer relationship, I will describe that I've been on a journey my whole career life in terms of my own affinity for how I think about the employee-employer relationship. I don't deny at some point in my career I was one of those guys, don't trust them. They need to work harder. That what's wrong with these people? That kind of thing. And maybe even bordering on the, you can't trust anybody. They're going to cut every corner they can. And I've come 180 on that now, and time again, this is now proven to me. And I wish I had really embraced it much, much sooner in my career. And that is this: if you and your company have done a reasonably good job of hiring a good person for the role you've got, that person wants to do good work. They don't innately wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to get dressed and I'm going to go suck at my job. That's my goal for the day. they're going to want to do that good work, and that puts the pressure on the leader to be able to build that clarity of, what a win does look like.
Yeah.
And I think it is powerful. I'm saying this because I think it is powerful for the leader to ask the employee, I'm going to tell you what a win looks like, but help me understand what a win could do for you.
Yes. Yes.
I like that. I like that combo.
So that's the clarity goat. Another one is, a connection. Let me give you a connection goat because so what does this look like from your perspective? Is you can hardly say that, you can't say that too much, right? Like if you go through your day and you're like, what does this look like from your perspective, and actively listen to that, that's a really good one. And then another one is so I really care about, and then you say the thing that you can really care about, that you genuinely can really care about. So if we have a relationship, I could say, I really care about you. And I'm confident we can find the solution we can work with here. But you could also say, I really care about this project, or I really care about this outcome for this customer. The other day, I was getting ready to do a keynote in a very large group, and there was some conflict with the tech guy, and we were about, we were about to start. And I didn't know him, so I couldn't say, hey, I really care about you, right? That would have been disingenuous. But I said, I know you really care about the outcome of this event and the tech being great, and so do I. And I'm confident we can find a solution we can work with here, right? And so that is a really important, powerful phrase too.
A diffuser. I like
Yeah.
that. I'm curious. I think related to that might be one thing I work with a lot of people on is a simple conjunctive that changes the whole dynamic. When a leader is talking to a team member or a team in a team meeting, and people seem to be going down a certain track, and the leader's got a different idea,
Mhm.
inevitably the whether that comes from our schooling and our programming, the thing you say is, but here's my idea.
But yeah,
And that one little conjunctive has a tendency to derail the whole conversation because you
yeah,
just dismissed everything everybody's
yeah.
said up to that point. So I coach people to work hard on the and conjunctive,
Yes,
just a
yes,
simple one word to and probably make a phrase. I hear what you're saying, and maybe there's another idea. And
yeah.
so it maintains the inclusivity of the discussion. So everybody is still chips on the table.
Doug, I am such a big believer in that. And it's interesting. So I have a 19-year-old kid who's a theater major who's really good at improv. And when he and his friends get together, so that he's got a lot of friends that are also improv, which yes and is the whole thing about improv, right? You got to just say yes and this. And I watch how they go through life. And how they go through life is they don't say no or but to each other. They're like, yes. And have you considered, like, even when they're not doing improv? So I really do believe that that's a very, and they have good relationships. It's like, I'm watching these group dynamics. I'm like, this is impressive for these kids, you know?
Yeah. It sounds so simple on the surface and hard to imagine, but I've even explored and done my own reading and research on it. And the what I understand in all the brain science work that has happened is that our brains are wired for survival. That's their perceived job one, is to keep us safe and keep us warm. And that's why we have this inbred fight or flight mechanism. And whatever the trigger may be that activates the fight or flight, if it does get activated, what happens in the brain and all the brain chemistry, you lose the power in your frontal lobe, and that's where our inductive reasoning happens, and that's where our work occurs. The it's like a power out, blackout. That mode, that node just shuts down. And so if you're in an important meeting and you say, you just gave me an idea, and I say, yeah, but I think we ought to go this way, you go into flight or fight.
Right.
And I've just pushed you out of the meeting, basically.
Yes, especially if you have more power than me,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we're here talking about our book, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, but our book before that is Courageous Cultures. And we also did a ton of research around what you're talking about in psychological safety and in really practical ways. And one of the techniques that we talk about with that is if somebody brings you an idea, and I have a TEDx on this too, even if it's like a off-base, dingling idea, if you just shut it down, people are going to become part of the statistics of like, I'm never doing that again. But if you can respond with gratitude, now here's the thing, you're not responding, telling them it's a good idea, because if it's a crazy idea, you don't want to tell them that's a good idea. You're going to get more crazy ideas. But you could say, hey, thank you so much for caring about our organization, that you're contributing ideas. That's exactly what I need you to do. That is an important part of your role. Gratitude. Information. We can't use this idea right now because we're headed in this direction strategically, and your idea would take us in the complete opposite direction strategically, and then an invitation. So, what ideas do you have that would take us in the direction that we're headed right now? Right? And so that we call that responding with regard.
I love it. Very powerful. And again, as you're describing it, I thought about very specific anecdotes of examples. I have told this story before on the show, but it was so powerful. I don't ever mind repeating it. I was doing some team leadership coaching, and we had done a kind of a classic team assessment of where everybody thought the team was and the team dynamics. And we were partly following a script out of Patrick Lencioni's work, team charter, team contract, and that was our end game that we were working toward. But we had done this survey, and it was time to present the survey to the team. And we had these nice summary booklets made up. And the leader that had engaged me called me in before the meeting, and he opened the summary page, and in their graph, they had everybody was clustered in the upper quadrant, which is the bright green, go, go, go. We're all in sync, doing well. But there was one dot way off opposite, significant outlier. And
Was
he
it him?
said, yeah. He said, what do I need to do about this person? I said, number one, you can't go on a witch hunt. We let's go to the meeting and let's see what happens. And so we went in there, and we had barely gotten settled in our seats. And one guy goes, hey, this is me. I know I am. I'm the outlier. And everybody paused a minute, and he got real somber, and he said, I think this proves that I've been thinking for a long time that I need to ask for a transfer. He said, none of my ideas ever survive in our meeting. I feel like I'm always the contrarian, but I just look at this business and this world differently. And I probably need to go find an alignment where I can better serve the greater good. And the whole team, without any prompting, they just kind of one by one just piled in and said, absolutely not.
Oh,
We love you being the contrarian. That spawns better thinking on our parts. And and one person said, "We're sorry, we've never made that clear to you that you're an important part of this team. Please, please, please do not transfer."
Doug,
And
thank goodness that they had that meeting, right?
yeah, right. And as I understood the story, months later, he embraced that feedback and hung around, and part of what we were able to do with the charter and the contract work, we built up a much better dynamic on how the team could engage with each. We set some ground rules and set some parameters. And you can't see it in my video background here, but on top of that bookcase, I have an Elmo doll, the Sesame Street Elmo character.
Yeah.
I have had companies that have used that. One of their rules of the road in a meeting is, when people kind of derail the meeting and they're taking off on chasing rabbits and running down a different track, one of the rules of engagement is Elmo, which stands for enough, let's move on.
Oh, cute.
And big, powerful company meeting teams, leadership teams have had an elbow tool sitting in the middle of the
Love
table,
it.
just as a friendly reminder that they do have a rule if somebody derails the meeting.
Oh, that's great. It's really cute. By the way, I think we have the same bookshelves. That's what I'm looking.
It kind of looks like it. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, in any other of your goats that
Yeah,
could help us
yeah.
right
So we
now?
talked about some clarity goats. We talked about some connection goats, curiosity, a commitment. This one is what we call scheduling the finish. And so we've agreed to this. All right. So you and I, so maybe we're in a conflict and we decide we're going to treat each other better when we have our meetings. And we make specific, like, these are the habits. This is what this looks like. And maybe we agree we're never going to say but, right? We're only going to say and to one another. And then say, okay, so we have 3 more meetings between now and the end of July. Why don't we go ahead right now? Let's get it on the calendar. Let's put a time on the calendar for July 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to talk about how it's going. Now, so it's like, so what we've agreed to this, let's schedule a time to talk about it again. The reason that that works so well is if we're both looking at that calendar, it flips over to July, we're like, ooh, I got to have that meeting with Doug. I better be ready to show up and have done what I committed to do, right? And if we don't do what we say for one reason or another, we don't have, neither one of us has to get the courage to raise the conversation again because we've already scheduled it. If we do what we say we're going to do, that gives us a built-in opportunity to say, cool, look, we did that. That's good, and celebrate success. And you get more of what you encourage and celebrate, and less of what you ignore. So that is one of my favorite commitment goats as well. And then one more I'll give you is one because you're talking about when you move into that amygdala part of the brain, like when tensions are high. This is one of my favorites for this, and this is it's called just tell me more. So if somebody comes into your office and they are escalated and they are screaming, they're getting louder, either actually louder or metaphorically louder, or they're using F-bombs. If the first thing you do is say, hey, can you tell me more about what you're thinking here? They don't have to be loud because they know you're listening. And that's the reason people get loud is because they want to be heard. So you just immediately say, I hear you. Tell me more. You will de-escalate the conversation.
Yeah. Kind of a psychology 101. You don't say calm down.
Right. Absolutely. Nobody got calmer by being told to calm down. The other
Well,
thing, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing in the book we talk about the traditional approaches to dealing with conflicts or to giving feedback that we disagree with. And one of them is, and this may be contrarian, but this is the sandwich feedback technique where you tell them something good and you tell them what you really want to say and then you tell them something good. And that can be such a problem because people get confused and you don't have their attention. Now, if somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, do you have any feedback?" Like at the end of the show, and we hang up and I say, "Hey, you have any feedback next time I do a podcast?" And you say, "Oh yeah, this stuff worked good. This I would do differently next time." That's perfectly appropriate. But if I'm trying to get you to stop coming in late to our meetings to tell you how good you are at other things and then say, and stop coming in late and then tell you other good things, that gets very, very muddied.
Yeah, totally agree. Let me shift gears just one little bit here. There's one classic scenario that I get a lot about, and I'll confess, I've got a pet peeve about a phrase. The term is managing up. I often get clients, I'll say, brand new client, we kind of do an onboarding, and then I'll say, all right, let's dive in. Where do you want to begin? And they say, I got to learn how to manage up my organization. Well, my experience, and this maybe is a little bit of word slicing, dicing, but what I tend to tell people, there's no such thing. Let's stop talking about that because there is no such thing. That's like, is there really unicorns? What you can do is you can become a better influencer up the channel, but you are not going to manage your boss. And maybe I'm being very literal with the word, but I think it sets up false expectations that a junior is going to miraculously change the landscape with the senior. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. And certainly not in a management way. But the point is, conflict often does come down,
Yes.
maybe that senior leader
Yep.
is let's call it, maybe he's not really a very good leader. You just
Right.
drew a bad hand and now you're working
Right.
for this person that is not real great. So what are some of the conflict protectors or mitigators that people
Yeah.
can do in those
So we got a
scenarios?
whole chat, a whole section, like a whole section on influencing your boss. Like, what do you do managing conflict with your boss? So, for example, what if my boss won't make a decision? I mean, that one's near and dear to my heart because I worked for one guy. Ugh, he would not make a decision, right? And we saw that a lot. So you can't manage up, you can't make make a decision, but you can influence that. And so the first thing, so which of the dimensions are at play here? Well, I would start with curiosity. Right? So why are they not making a decision? And so, hey, I'm curious what this looks like from your perspective. I've noticed that you're hesitating on this decision, or we've had this on the docket for a long time. I'm really curious what's going on for you. Because they may be dealing with pressures that you do not understand. There may be other things at play. They may have confidential information and they may say there's something going on, but I can't really tell you about it. But just trust me, we can't make this decision right now. Okay, now you have data instead of being frustrated that they're not making the decision. So start with curiosity. Now, if they don't come to you with, hey, just back off or a good reason, maybe they just are one of these people who can't make a decision. Then one of the things you can do is come with clarity, with an informed point of view. I see two ways that we could go here. We could go with option A, and here's what that would mean. We could go with option B, and here's what that would mean. I recommend we go with option A for this reason. Now you've just made it so much easier because you're closer to the situation than your boss is probably. And they may like, oh, you really have thought this through. Okay. And then schedule the finish because they still might not make a decision right in that moment. But then you could say, I want to give you a moment to think about this. When do you think would be a good time for us to make the final call? And then you say that you give them and you time bound it. Now, that may or may not work, but it works more often than you might think.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I also related to that, I think, is another kind of simple solution that I find powerful. Junior leaders are trying to satisfy the senior guys at every chance they get, right? So you've got a senior above you who is just throwing logs over the fence. I mean, new tasks, new projects, new priorities. It's just stacking up, and you're scrambling trying to satisfy and be compliant and be, helpful. So, it creates these scenarios of working the late nights and long weekends, just trying to jam this stuff through the pipe. I encourage junior leaders to use most of them get locked into the thought my answer needs to be either yes or no, and no is terrible. It's detrimental to tell the boss, no, I can't do that. But I say there's one in the middle that is yes, but not now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, I'll do this.
Right.
I want to remind you, I've got these 5 other priorities that
Right.
you gave me.
Yep.
So
Yep.
can you give me a time window that this would be sufficient?
Yes. Yes.
And what I've done, again, not scientifically, but anecdotally, 9 out of 10 times that boss will say, "Oh, yeah, it can wait.
Right.
When do you think you can have it?"
Right.
And
Right.
then we're recording on a Thursday. You can say something like, "Well, I'll have it to you next Thursday. Is that okay?"
Right.
And the boss can acknowledge. And then if they say, "Yeah, that'll be fine," guess what? You've got some time to maybe deliver it early.
Right.
You can deliver on Tuesday, so you've under
Right.
promised and over delivered, and now you're a winner.
Yes. Yes. I was looking for the chapter. But what to say when you need to say no, even to your boss, right?
Right.
And what are the powerful phrases in that? And we talk about whenever you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something or someone else.
Right.
And you can only do so many things. So one of the things we say is start with a yes, say yes. So what am I saying yes to? Just like you said, yeah. Wow, that sounds like a fantastic idea, and I can see why you think I'm the right person for that project. Yes. And, not but, right? And I have these 5 other things, priorities going on at this moment. And so to me, it seems like what I really should do is finish these things first. How does this look from your perspective? Right. And so you're providing information, you're coming with an informed point of view, but you're not coming across as negative because you're coming across with that yes and this. Yeah.
I love it. Very good. Well, Karin, this has been great. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you or find the book, etc.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So it's been a joy talking to you. I can tell we're kindred spirits. So my website is Let's Grow Leaders. And I'm Karin with an I, Karin.Hurt. And love to connect with you on LinkedIn. The book is available everywhere. It is on Audible as well. I know podcast listeners mostly want the Audible book, and it is read by us. So people tell us, oh, I feel like you're riding around in my backseat of the car talking to me about my workplace conflicts.
Love it. Love it. Well, as always, folks, we'll have that information in the show notes. So if you're streaming right now, don't check that out. Find a safe place and take a look there, but you'll have that information available. And I think that's it for today, Karin. One last time, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
I do like to remind you folks that we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name. Go over there, check out the archives. We have now hit the 400 episode milestone and moving to 500 as fast as we can. So happy to celebrate with you and enjoy the content. And if you've got an idea for a future guest or a topic we haven't covered yet, please drop me a note. Let me know, leave a comment, whatever. Would love to hear from you. But for now, we're going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.